Hello and welcome to our presentation. Thanks for joining us again this week. We appreciate you coming along each week. I guess that means we're saying something that's vaguely interesting and useful for you. Any feedback you've got on what you'd like to be seeing, please let me know. I'd be happy to change what we're doing if you think there's a way that we could do it that would help you more. So let's look at today's agenda and what we'd like to talk about with you. We're going to briefly go through the self-employed income grant scheme. Oh, I'm getting my words all muddled. Self-employment income support scheme grant. Easy, see? So we're going to look at that. We're also going to look at a little bit of feedback that we've had from clients on the bounce back loan scheme. We're then going to talk about the job retention scheme. We'll talk about how it is in action at the moment, and then we will move on to talk about the government announcements and what they mean for the furlough scheme in the future. We'll then talk about business impact towards the end before moving into questions and answers. As ever, I'm hoping that this will be about 20 minutes, followed by question and answer opportunity. However, if you have questions, please ask them as we go. If you ask your questions whilst I'm talking, then the team in the background can get answers to you earlier, and also there'll be a nice bank there that we can go through at the end. We've also noticed there's a slight delay in between me talking and you hearing because of the computers and wherever the signal's going in between now and you seeing it. So the sooner you get your questions in, the better, if you ask me. So please do. The team in the background is Kate producing, flicking the video on, and Charlie, who will be answering questions. We can't hear you, so please type your questions. We'll be publishing a recording of this to YouTube. We'll try not to use your names if you use them, though. If you don't want people to know your name, then don't use your name. The presentation is only a summary of current issues. It should not be construed as advice. Please get in touch with a member of the team if you'd like information that's specific for your business. Okay, so the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme is now open for applications. As I understand it, it's been phased over a few days. The earliest clients that we're aware of who could apply it was midday today. So fingers crossed that there are people making their applications rather than listening to me. How exciting, we finally got there. It seemed like it would be months away. Well, it was months away, but hasn't time gone quickly? Maybe not if you've been waiting for that grant though. But it's there. Our understanding is that the grant will be paid out within 6 days, and our evidence so far suggests that HMRC are keeping to the times that they set. HMRC should have written to you already to say whether you are eligible or not. However, if you are unsure whether you are eligible for this grant, there's an easy way to work this out. Have you filled in the self-employment pages on your personal tax return? If you have filled those pages in, you are eligible for consideration. There are then a few conditions that need to be met. Self-employment income has to be over 50% of your income, and you have to have been adversely impacted by coronavirus. So I've had clients ask me, what does adversely impacted mean? Have I been adversely impacted? For example, one person has said to me, I've been able to continue trading and continue to make money, but I'm now having to do all of my work from home whilst dealing with a family. I'm also very uncertain about whether I will be able to continue to make money as people start to slowly go back to work, and my concern is for that period then that I might see my income drop. Now, this is my opinion on this. The condition is you have to have been adversely impacted, not financially impacted. And so in my mind, the fact that you're having to work from home, the fact that you're having to work so much harder to keep your business going, and the fact that you're trying to do all of that whilst in this case running a family as well, I would say that you have certainly been adversely impacted in kind of the stress of that burden alone. Time will tell whether you have been financially impacted and whether that has been adverse or not, but I wouldn't say that stops you from applying for this grant now. I've also had other people who've come to me and said, I've received a letter from HMRC, but I'm not self-employed anymore. I used to be self-employed. And there have been cases where that self-employment has stopped during the 1920 tax year. And in one specific case, it was certainly before December. And they're no longer self-employed. They may have moved from self-employment to a company, and a company isn't self-employment as far as this grant is concerned. Am I eligible? And the answer to that is, unfortunately, no. This is a scheme that is for people who are continuing to trade as self-employed and who have been adversely impacted. Their self-employment has been adversely impacted by coronavirus. And so if you're not self-employed anymore, then you cannot be adversely impacted because that trade doesn't exist and therefore cannot be impacted. So watch out for that. Who's going to notice, though, that there's so many grant applications going in and all sorts? Firstly, I mean, you've got to fill in a form that says, have you been adversely impacted? So you'll have to lie on a government form, and you should not do that. You must not do that. But on top of that, it will be so easy to look at self-employment records and say, well, you've received 0 self-employment income this year, and yet you've then applied for a grant based on trade in previous years. Now, there will be some very few people, but there will be some people who have expenses this year, but absolutely no income for one reason or another. Now that's different, and I'm not saying what I'm saying is it would be very easy for HMRC computers to look at your tax return and say, this is blatantly not an acceptable use of the grant. In my opinion, I think that will be an easy way for them to audit whether these grants are being appropriately given out. So that's SEIS. Next, I'd like to talk about the bounce back loans very quickly. There's been quite a high take up and quite a high success rate. No surprise maybe that the form to apply does not have many questions, and they are quite straightforward questions. So, as I say, maybe no surprise that the approval rate is much greater than the old coronavirus business interruption loan scheme. On the first day, there were 130,000 applications. 69,000 of those were approved on the same day, which is almost double the total approved on the civils scheme in the previous few months. And my understanding is the latest statistics are showing 270,000 have successfully applied and received funding, a loan from this scheme. And again, this is another way that the government is sharing the burden of bouncing back or surviving coronavirus. The reason I say that is because this is a loan rather than a grant. So you will have to pay back a bounce back loan. Although it is 100% backed, they will be looking for you to repay the money that you borrow, sharing the burden of the financial cost of surviving or enduring coronavirus. And the easiest route to get this is to apply with your bank. However, that is not your only route. If you are unable to apply with your bank, there are other banks on the British Business Bank website, which is part of the government web pages, which will give you information on other lenders. The last time I read the guidance, it was saying if you're unsuccessful with one lender, then try another lender. So they are saying if you try with one and you're unsuccessful, look elsewhere, which is interesting. One thing we have seen is almost every bank has a different definition of what an undertaking in difficulty is. So do read the form that your bank are sending you and answer those questions carefully and accurately. Again, we've had someone ask us on this. We were struggling to trade before coronavirus. Are we able to apply? And my answer was to read the questions on the bank website and answer them honestly. The bank will inform you. my understanding is that there will still be the possibility of applying, even if you were an undertaking in difficulty. It may just be a little bit less likely or to be an automatic approval. Excuse me, how long will the scheme remain available? There's a question. I'm afraid we don't know how long this scheme will remain available. You could look at the statistics and say it's been quite a costly scheme to the government, but you could also look at the statistics for coronavirus in general and say it's a drop in the ocean compared to everything else, and at least this can be repaid by us to the government. So it's not the same as a grant, which is a one-off hit to the government books, to the Exchequer's books, but this is a loan that will be repaid over 6 years, and so at least there's the opportunity to get this money back. So maybe it will remain open for a while. However, also things are changing constantly, so if you feel that there might be a need for a bounce back loan, I would say consider this quickly before anything changes, because we just don't know what will come in the future, and we do know that this is a costly scheme along with a few other costly schemes as well. So the furlough loans, furlough grants, that's a typo in the title. You can apply for funds 14 days before payday, and that means that if your payday is 31st of March, you can apply from the 17th of May. If your payday is 31st of May, you can apply from the 17th of May. What this means is it's almost time to do it all again. Our payroll team is getting ready to support anyone who has a payroll and who would like our help with getting the grant application through. There'll be a lot of other people out there who are preparing them as well. We will endeavour to get as many of these furlough grant applications through as quickly as possible, as we endeavour to get the money back to you by the end of the month and before payday. What that means is that the sooner we can have information from clients, the better. If you know that something has changed, if you know you have a new starter, or if you know someone is being brought back from furlough or put onto furlough, please tell us, because we can make those changes to the payroll in advance so that when the application window opens, we can process as many as possible, as quickly as possible, helping as many people on the same day as we can. Inevitably, when you have a pile of work to do, you have to start somewhere, and there will be someone at the bottom of that pile. Getting information from you guys quickly means that it will be easier for us to process that pile on the day that we can. So now we move to the government announcements. There have been a few government announcements this week, and some of them have an impact financially. The biggest ones are that the job retention scheme has been extended until October 2020. So that's indicating to me that the Chancellor does not think that we will be out of the woods before October. That's in line with what Boris Johnson was saying at the weekend and what we've been hearing from Parliament since. It's good to hear that there will be some mechanism of support in place during that entire time, but surely this is their best case scenario rather than their worst case scenario, frustratingly, but maybe that helps us with our own economic planning. If we know that the government is thinking that we will be needing support from this scheme until October, it helps us to plan ahead. But bear in mind, previous to this, they said that it would be open, that it would be coming to a close in a month or so. So we don't know when this scheme will end and when it will be withdrawn. What we do know is that from August, employers will be expected to start sharing the burden of the scheme. Again, the sort of detail on this is a little bit thin, so we're not quite sure what sharing the burden means. But presumably it means that as an employer, we will have to put money into the employees' wages, as well as the government putting money in. The Chancellor has said that the government will continue to pay the lion's share of the payments. I'm not sure how much of a share a lion needs, but if he wanted all of it, I'd certainly give it to him. Maybe they'll pay 99 and we'll pay 1%, but I don't think that's the case. What it does sound like is that employees on furlough will be expected to receive 80% still. It's just that there will be a shift in who's paying it from government to employer over time. which is an interesting approach. Again, we don't know whether this will be brought in sector by sector or whether it will be brought in for everyone at the same time, but we know it will be starting from August onwards. We've also been told that part-time workers, that workers will be able to come back from furlough on a part-time basis instead of full-time, allowing them to provide some services to their employer, whereas at the moment an employee cannot provide any services to the employer that will help them to generate income or promote the business. So it means that I believe this is from August as well, that there'll be a bit more flexibility in how the scheme is open. Now, maybe that will come before August, but it seems that August is the date that the rules on this scheme are being changed. There's been no announcement yet on extension to the self-employed income support scheme. Maybe this will follow. We've just reached the point where we can apply for a grant that covers 3 months. Maybe it will be a further 3 months, and then there will be another scheme or grant payout. We just don't know. Maybe the government thinks that as a self-employed person, you are more able to work 2 meters away from everyone else, which is bonkers, as I say it. Presumably further support will be available, but nothing has been mentioned yet. Also, there has been no mention of support to cover dividends. So if you are a company director and you have been taking a low salary and high dividends, then there is no support to cover the lion's share of your income. It's only the salaried element which can be covered by the furlough scheme, and that can only be covered if you are unable to work due to coronavirus and you have put yourself or the board has put you on furlough. So that is the government announcement. So now we can talk about the business impact of them. I've got a few statistics to hit you with. So these are as I've seen in the UK press, and as reported this morning. The job retention scheme is likely to cost £80 billion. The Treasury and Bank of England have been considering the impact of this and made some assessments about what the end of this year picture will look like. They're saying that the estimated cost of coronavirus is likely to be 300 billion. They are predicting, based on the scenario they consider most likely, that there will be a deficit of 337 billion in the budget by the end of this year. Now, we're not that far away from the Chancellor's budget, which was back in March, and back then he was forecasting a 55 billion deficit. So this is a big increase. Now, depending on the shape of the economic downturn, depending on how quickly we recover from this, the deficit may end up being between 209 billion and 516 billion. So these are their almost best and worst case scenarios. Even the best case is quite a large number. I think this means that we're likely to be entering into a time where it is more difficult to trade. And with it being more difficult to trade, the sooner we can be prepared for this, the better. We will be prepared to weather the storm. However, is it a recession? It's just a little aside, really. Is this a recession? And the answer is no, it's not a recession yet. The reason for that is because you need 2 quarters of economic decline in order for it to be a recession. And we have had one, but we have not yet had 2. And the economic downturn was incredibly sharp, and I think it was one of the biggest the biggest economic downturns that has been seen. So it's been a sharp drop to almost nil in terms of GDP. Excuse me, that I don't know that for certain. What I would say is it's a definite drop. What we need to be thinking about, in my mind, is how we will recover from this. And we can use the information that's being provided by the government and how they are predicting that the nation will proceed. to inform how our business will. It's possible that we will see a very sharp, or we have seen a very sharp decline in the economy, and it's possible that we will see a very sharp increase again once we are released from having to stay at home and being advised to work from home if we can. However, that is believed to be highly unlikely, and the reason it's believed to be highly unlikely, I think, is because of this phased withdrawal from the current conditions, and so it's very unlikely that we will see a snapback to normal when there are still restrictions in place. But that's the best case and highly unlikely. Next up is the L-shaped economic decline, still not calling it recession. And what that looks like, I'm going to get my lefts and rights muddled. No, I think I've got this, is a significant reduction in economic activity, but then it continues at that low level, maybe increasing slightly, but not a big sharp return to normal. L would be flat. So we've got the decline and then it remains flat. And essentially the assessments are saying that would be quite devastating, obviously, for the economy. We should be prepared for an impact from that on our businesses. Alternatively, maybe it will be something in between where we can start to return to normal and that starts to improve our businesses' fortunes. I think it's smart to start thinking, how will this look for my business? What will happen to my business's trade? So I'm suggesting that we do a little bit of planning on income and expenditure. That you think, at the moment, what can my income be? What can my costs be? I'm going to see if you can see my mouse. I'll hover my mouse over it. What costs do I need to bear in order to support that income? Therefore, we can work out a monthly profit. I'm being highly optimistic and assuming you'll all still be making profit. And then assessing, is that going to be enough to keep going? And think about what a normal month would look like. As it is at the moment, then think, well, what if the restrictions start to be lifted? For example, we've got restaurants that might say, well, we have been doing delivery only, but we're now opening up a collection service. When we can open that collection service, what's that likely to do to our income? What will we need in terms of staff in order to support the additional income if we think there will be some? What profit will that make? Is that enough to keep going? Yes or no? And how long for? How sustainable is it? And then as restrictions are lifted further, have another think about what things are going to look like. This is just guessing, but if you start to make informed guesses based on your experience of your business and your kind of beliefs and knowledges as a business owner, you'll start to think about what will it look like and am I okay with that? Is this how I want my business to look? How long can I survive with it looking like this? Is it worth me borrowing more, or how much do I need to borrow? But I think having that overview of your income and expenditure and your prediction of what that will look like in the future will be fantastically helpful. Just keep it on your mind is what I would say. Keep thinking, how much do I need? Do I have what I need? Do I need more? That's everything I wanted to go through with you today. So we've had a little look at the self-employment income support scheme, the bounce back loan, feedback, job retention scheme, government announcements, the business impact, and how I think that you can help yourself by planning a little bit for the future. I'd like to ask for questions and just have a little look and see whether any questions have been left. So there have been no questions. Thank you very much for not putting us on the spot. If you've got any questions that you think of afterwards, do come to us with them. We'd be happy to answer them for you. Thank you very much for tuning in to listen. I hope you found it useful. Again, if there's anything you think we could be doing to improve these or to help you more, we'd be very interested to hear that so we can keep offering you information that's useful at a time that's useful. We'll also be looking at how often we do these over the next month, because I am hopeful that things will start to stabilise and maybe there'll be less to tell you on a weekly basis. At that point, we'll consider dropping them down or just reducing the amount we say, making these a little bit quicker. Thank you very much for turning up. Thank you to Kate for her help with the presentation, and Charlie for being there to answer questions if they'd come in. Hope you're all doing well, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you soon. Cheers. Bye.